So today we're going to get started. We have the privilege to have with us Rochelle Israel. She's the acting HR for the Great Lakes area. And I know we had a lot of people that asked about the RIF avoidance. So Rochelle's come to us to graciously give us a presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And I'm going to ask you to bear with me a little bit today. I was in Potomac earlier this week working on network optimization and caught a little cold, but I didn't want that to keep me from communicating with you because in today's changing times of the United States Postal Service, the open line of communication must stay there. So much is happening, and I would not at all miss the opportunity to come and talk to you about the changes within the Postal Service. I want to say thank you for the invite, and on behalf of Joanne Feinke, Great Lakes Area AVP, I want to say thank you, Craig, for the invitation and allowing me to spend a few hours with you this morning. Special thanks to all of our veterans out there at being Veterans Day. Hello to Louis. Louis and I talk a lot. Once again, thank you, Craig. Nancy calls me all the time, so you guys got a lot of representation out there. Hello, Nancy. I talked to Kevin quite a bit. Matter of fact, Kevin and I was just cut the rug last week. And he did a great job with that, so we had a lot of fun last week in Indy. And of course, Brian keeps me posted on several events. Don't get an opportunity to talk to Jay or the other guy, but I wanted you all to know that your representatives keep in contact with the Great Lakes area on behalf of you and all of their constituents to ensure we're on the right track and that we maintain a partnership of communications. So that's why it was very important, in spite of my little cold, that I will be here with you today. What Craig asked me to talk to you about today is about the RIF process. And I have to say, in my 33-year career with the United States Postal Service, this is probably not one of the best topics that I wanted to present at this time about the RIF and the reduction in force. But it's important that you have the information, and that's what we're faced with as the USPS in this ever-changing environment. So I'm going to share as much with you, give you an opportunity to address some questions. And I was telling Louis this morning, on the 9th they talked about our EAS pay package, and I was hoping it came out after we had this meeting today. But it didn't, and I had to be here, so if time permits at the end, if you have any questions regarding that as well, I'll do my very best to address those questions for you. Okay, let's talk about the RIF process. When does RIF come into place? The RIF process comes into place when we have impacted employees. And impacted employees are identified as those employees when their position is no longer authorized by the organization. The recent RIF kind of process that we just went through as EAS employees occurred with the May 31st end date of some of those postal employees who wanted to leave. So because of the reduction in positions at the district level, at the area level, and at the headquarters level, we recently experienced a RIF, or tried to do RIF avoidance. So what do we do when a RIF comes into place? There's a couple of responsive strategies that we try, or we call RIF avoidance methods. Now, the RIF avoidance methods are optional. It's not a requirement, but it's several things that we try to do to reduce the impact to our employees. I get a lot of calls in the Great Lakes area about job postings. We're trying not to post as many EAS positions. We are allowing a lot of lateral and transfers because due to the many optimizations that are upon us, we're trying to find or hold landing spots so that if you don't want to leave the organization, you do not have to. So what are some of our response strategies or risk avoidance methods? We usually offer a VEER, a voluntary early retirement. In May, of course, we had the VEER with an incentive. I have been receiving a lot of questions about, Rochelle, is there going to be an incentive or a VEER? Some of us is hanging on just for that. Well, the latest information, and like I said, I was in headquarters earlier this week, is because of the financial situation at this time. And I have to be careful with that because things change by the minute around here. There is no monetary incentive offered. We also, of course, have optional retirement, and that's when you're eligible to retire. And if things get a little rough, you can just optionally retire. We've automated the 991 process, and it's called the e-career process. And of course, that's providing you the opportunity to go into the system and ask or vie for different positions within the organization. And a lot of times with that e-career concept, we have what we call limited competition. If you're in an impacted or risk-impacted area, we may post some jobs in what we call the limited area of competition to allow for placement within your competitive area. And with the recent VEER, some of you, as I was walking in, was asking about those checks that came out in November. Those checks have been out and they should be at your office if you were a retiring person for the $10,000 incentive that we offered with the recent VEER. Once again, impacted employees. Let's talk a little bit more about impacted employees. I said earlier, it means that your position is no longer authorized in the organization. However, you will remain in that position until you are either placed through the e-career application process, either you retire optionally or with the VEER, the voluntary early retirement concept, or you're separated. I do want to say within the Great Lakes area, no one was separated in the recent VEER or the reorganization that we had. Everyone who either wanted a job, received a job. If you wanted to retire, you were able to retire. And the Great Lakes area was successful in placing all of our EAS employees in a recent reorganization that took place in May. And when you are identified as an impacted employee, you will remain in your position until one of those three things happen with you as an employee. So what about the VEER? Who's eligible to apply for a VEER? In order to be eligible for the VEER, you must meet a couple of requirements. You must be age 50 or older with at least 20 years of credible services, or have at least 25 years of credible service at any age. Keeping in mind, if you fall under the civil service retirement, that you will receive a penalty of 2% of your base salary for each year you're under the age 55. And also, no annual leave or sick leave can be used towards adding to your years to meet the eligibility requirement for VEER. And if you did opt for the VEER, your pay immediately starts, or your annuity is what we refer to it, the first day of the month after the effective date of your retirement. Okay, if there is a voluntary early retirement, what we have to do within Human Resources or within the organization is to appeal to OPM. We have to have approval for OPM to offer a VEER. The VEER is also offered for a specific date. You have to be off the roads, and I'll use the example of our recent VEER in May, by May 31st. So there is a approved specific effective date. There is a targeted audience where the types of employees that are authorized the VEER is identified. And then all VERA eligible employees will receive a VERA package in the mail from HRSC, which is the Human Resources Shared Services Center. And that package will provide to you an estimated annuity statement from EGIT. Usually all of the VERA information, if we do offer a VERA, will be posted on the blue page, and they usually come with timelines. It'll tell you on this date you do this, on this date you do X, Y, Z. So we're trying to ensure that the communications is out there in every avenue, and then my commitment to you is that as often as I can, I will come out and meet with your work groups, participate in any kind of training symposiums that you have, because once again, effective communications is all we have to give to you so that you can make the well-informed decisions that you need. So let's talk a little bit more about the VERA decision window. There is a period of time that you have to do certain things within an acceptance of a VERA. And that timeline and those drop dead dates are usually included in the VERA information package that comes to you from the Human Resources Shared Services Center. There's another thing that you have to pay real close attention to, and that's the VERA irrevocable date. Because if you change your mind along the process, you must pull your VERA application before the irrevocable date, or you will be forced to take the VERA. So pay close attention to the VERA timelines if and when a VERA is announced. And what about your pay, which is most important to you? The annuity, of course, is based on your years of credible services with the Postal Service. And once again, I said, in addition, if you are a civil service retirement system employee, like I am, if you're under the age 55, like I am, you'll get a 2% reduction of annuity for each year under the age 55. And if you're under the first retirement process, there's no reduction in annuity due to the age. Now, what we do know that there is a Senate bill out there, and I tried to share it with some of you, that talks about a VERA or some type of, not a monetary incentive, but a incentive offered in this new Senate bill. And what that bill is about is, and it kind of reads, it's of October of 2014, if the Postal Service gets approval for a VERA, and you take that VERA, and you're part of the CSRS retirement process, that it could be a potential 1 year added to your total credible service. So say, for instance, if you needed 1 year, they're talking or trying to pass a bill that if you're under CSRS, you will get that 1 year credit. If you're under FERS, you'll get a 2-year credit. But if you take that years of service credit, you can't take the money. There will be no incentive now that there is any money. To be clear, that's been identified as of today, right now. But if you do elect to have that 1 year or 2 years credited, you cannot also elect to take an incentive payment if it was offered to you. Optional retirement. Optional retirement is like if you're 55, you got your years of service, things are starting to change a little bit too more rapidly for you, and you just want to go, you can go. And if you're eligible for optional retirement, you have to contact the Human Resources Shared Service Center. Usually they will reach out and send you a package if you're under the VERA. But if it's optional retirement, HRSC, SSC will not contact you. You have to contact them. And if you want to print an annuity estimate, you can go on to light blue. And now we got E everything. And so once again, we got E retire. So you can go into the light blue or the blue page, click on E retire, and you can get information or submit the information to say that you want to retire from the Postal Service. The e-retirement system is open to all full-time employees who are, a couple of things. If you're within 5 years of retirement, you can go on there. If you're within 6 months of retirement eligibility, that information, or if you're currently eligible for retirement, also known as optional retirement, your information will be in there. Be careful that the annuity estimates are just that, they're estimates. Sometimes I get phone calls and like, hey, you said I was going to get X, Y, Z, and I got more, I got less. They're estimates. Your actual calculations will be done by Egan when you actually identify the date that you want to retire. So that's a little bit about optional retirement. However, if you want to stay along and hang on with this, you can go through the e-career process and make sure you complete your e-career candidate profile. The e-career takes the place of the 991, and you can do pages 1 and 2 of that e-career. It's an automated system and it's pretty user-friendly. What I do like about the e-career system is that it will hold some of your information and you don't have to retype some of your basic information in over and over again. So with the old 991, even though we may have kept it on our disk, the e-career will keep some of the information that's populated and it will stay in there. And also during Form 50 changes, that information will be held as well. So in the e-career, you identify your summary of accomplishments. And of course, we do that by addressing KSAs. Okay, thank you so much. Kevin took care of me. And of course, your summary of accomplishments goes into addressing your knowledge and experiences that it relates to the requirement of the vacancy in which you're applying for. I mentioned earlier about limited area of competition postings, and that will be identified on the vacancy announcement. Limited area of competition allows us to place those employees in impacted areas without everyone else who may or may not be impacted coming into that process so that we can have placement for all of our employees. Placement opportunities. If vacancies are advertised, watch what the vacancy is talking about, the eligibility, who's eligible to reply, and it's up to each one of us to go in and apply the e-career process. If there is a RIF or a VERA, it's not something that someone's going to do for you. We all have to take control of our careers and go into the e-career process. Make sure you review whether or not is a non-competitive consideration availability, because if you are at the equal or same level of vacancy, you can ask for a non-competitive consideration. Or you can also ask for a non-competitive consideration to a lower level position. Also, when we come to the RIF process, placements can also occur into a craft position. And that may be a possible option for us if there is no other option and you want to remain with the Postal Service. The Human Resources Department at the local level will coordinate any kind of required examinations and any other skill set that you need to be placed into those craft positions. I know 33 years ago when we came into the service, we didn't have the test battery 473. And I know that some EAS employees, as they try to go back to the craft, they may or may not have to have taken that exam. But contact your local HR departments and they'll know what kind of required examinations are needed. Because of the union contracts, however, if that placement is into a craft position, salary protection may not apply for all of us placed into those bargaining positions, like I said, per union contracts. Non-competitive request for reassignment. Like I said, depending on the circumstances, we can request a non-competitive consideration, and they can be performed inside or outside of the e-career process. If non-career or competitive requests are performed outside of e-career, what I would suggest to you is that you create a candidate profile, print it out, and attach a cover letter to the profile. If you are an impacted employee, include that in your cover letter, because as we communicate or train review boards or selected officials, now because of so much change within the organization, we're asking them to consider those impacted employees if they're minimally qualified and give them a priority consideration. Some selected officials, however, will require that you do address the KSAs, and that'll just give them a better view of who you are and what your skill set is. And once again, the non-competitive is simply a request. It is not a mandate for the selected official to select you, but we do ask them to make sure if you are an impacted employee trying to avoid the RIF process, that they do give you priority consideration, not a mandate consideration. Relocation benefits often come up, and the relocation policies are changing a little bit within the organization. But if relocation is being allowed, it'll state it on the vacancy announcement. And if it's not allowed, it'll tell you that as well. And if you need more information on it, want to spend a lot of time on the relocation policy, you can go to the employee resource column, select relocation and travel, and it will give you information. There's a Q&A that's there if you need to have additional information regarding relocation benefits and if you qualify those. And if you're doing it through the non-competitive process here, make sure when you're talking or interviewing with the selected official that you discuss whether or not you can get relocation benefits, because that's always something up for negotiation with your selected official who can seek approval for relocation benefits. Also, if you're a RIFT or an impacted employee, there's salary protection. So if you were identified as an impacted employee and you decide to go to a lower level EAS position, you will receive 2 years saved grade and 2 years saved salary. And I do realize that's a little bit different as well. It used to be like an indefinite salary protection, but I guess once again, we're running out of money. So we got 2 years saved grade and 2 years saved salary. And that 2 years saved starts when your Form 50 is processed. That 2 years saved salary or saved grade protection starts when your Form 50 is processed. Now, are there any basic questions over the whole VERA or when RIF makes? Then I'm going to go into the RIF. Yes, sir.
I'm Rocco, I'm out of 130 Michigan. My question is, if you have a position that's been abolished for an EAS, and you have a position that they want to go into as a carrier craft, is the craft going to have a preference over an impact to EAS?
Right, because you're going to go to the bottom of their seniority. We cannot, because of their contractual guidelines. If your question is, do we go to the top of their roster, the answer is no. Because of their contractual guidelines, we cannot do that. That's just another option that we have if you want to remain employed with the Postal Service. Now, I will say, going into some of the craft positions, and I'm glad you said carrier, because that's about the only one they will allow you to go into. We are doing a lot of accessing in the clerk craft, and I've had many fights with the APWU when I try and put an EAS employee back into the clerk craft when there is accessing. Not to say that it cannot be done, but it is more of a challenge for us in human resources into the clerk craft because of the major excessing associated in all crafts. Now, with the recent legislative reform communications about 5-day delivery, you know, there's a 2-year hold on us going to a 5-day delivery. So the carrier position will be growing. We are hiring new categories of APW, which is called PSEs. And those PSEs also are now the foundation for a career hire. Before we had casual employees, and the casuals, if you were a casual, regardless of the years of service, it never led to a career employment. But now with the APW, that's what the PSCs are being allowed to do. So yeah, can we go back to the craft? I don't think there's much impact into the mail handling craft. And what we try to do, if there's an EAS placement back into the craft, we consider the craft that you were in prior to you becoming an EAS employee. Yes, ma'am.
Patty Murphy, branch 16 on Minneapolis. I got a phone call. I want to go back to what you talked about earlier. We talked about the postings.
Yes.
And we all know they're not posting right now in e-career. At least I haven't seen anything. However, I was informed this morning that in sales, they are now going to take all level 17s, 23s, and 25s and post them to the outside only. Now, if we're having RIF going on within the United States Postal Service with our employees who are already here, why would one department step out to the outside and hire from the outside instead of hiring from within?
Now, I'm not 100% sure that that's exactly what they're going to do. I have heard of that, but I agree with you. The pushback that we've given is that if there's going to be RIF impacted employees, and the concept behind it is that they want to go to the skill set of being able to market and generate revenue, and but my position, and we recently had an area HR managers meeting, and all of us feel the same, and we communicated that to Tony Viglianti, so that's why I said it's not 100% that they're going to do that. But the concept was that we didn't have the skill set to do the marketing, to do the revenue generation. They wanted to have people with that type of degree or whatnot. But once again, our position is we can be trained to do anything.
Thank
We have knowledge of postal products. Now, if they want us to smile, if they want us to be polite, then we will smile and be polite. So that is the pushback that we're giving. And like I said, we've had a lot of changeover in headquarters as well. And hopefully nobody recording this, but it might be. But we got a lot of people from the outside. And then that's what they think, well, let's get some new people in here. And our pushback is no. We have postal employees, and like I said, we may not have come up with a marketing degree. We may not be the sales persona person, but we can be taught to do just that.
I just want to thank you for your answer, but I'd like to respond back a little bit like Cliff Rucker is our area VP for sales. The gentleman comes from delivery. He's never had any kind of training in marketing or sales, but now he's running the sales department. So that just tells me right there that I guess we can train from within. But thank you for your answer. I appreciate it. And the 23s and 25s have all been posted on the outside. They are on USPS.com. They were just told that the 17s were going to go up next week on USPS.com. So I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that because we did discuss that. And like I said, the pushback, and it's 7, and I see Louis standing up. And I'm going to let him come on and do his thing. But there's 7 of us nationwide as area HR managers, and what a time for us to communicate that to the field in light of all of this optimization stuff we got going on. It impacts to postmasters and impacts to plant closings and different things of that nature. And like I said, our position is we can be trained to do anything. And hopefully
Absolutely.
that
This is a very interesting conversation I've been dealing with for the last 2 days and dealing with headquarters. And I love you, Ms. Israel. And Patty, thank you for that answer because it all makes sense. But the information I receive right now, and I'm looking for some area to go to, is that those jobs were posted earlier. Internally is what they told me from Cliff Rucker's office, that they were already posted internally and they did not find any qualified applicants. Now that's at least 15, level 23. That's what was told to me. So what I put back out is that, and Jaime Alexander, I spoke to him on the phone. I said, you need to get me somebody who saw those jobs posted or didn't see them. Somebody that would have some credibility in knowing what's going on in sales. Also, we need some people who applied for those positions that they said they weren't qualified. That's the data that I'm looking for right now. And we can move on. Now, this was shared to me at 3 o'clock yesterday. And that's where we're at right now. Now, in addition, and I'm not supposed to know I'm supposed to say this, but there's another 100 jobs in sales going up next week. That's supposed to be internally first.
It's going
But
to
those
be
are level 17s, at least 100 going up next week.
They're saying the 19s are going to go up internally, all 17s will go up externally. It was just a message I got this morning when I was upstairs. So, you know, how true it is, I'm not too sure, but that's what they heard. Yesterday afternoon, late afternoon, the manager who's giving me this information is also saying, oh, please don't say my name because I don't want to get used by my area sales rep. But the manager of Northland contacted me and said he was told all 17s are going external, only the 19s are going to stay with internal.
Okay, I'm going to start dealing with that again Monday because my people headquarters have been very honest, and I have a great deal of respect for Tony. He comes over to my office and shares everything, and I don't know, I called for him, but he had taken a day of annual leave yesterday, and he's in Florida right now. But I know he's going to call me Monday morning, and what Tony tells me it's going to be made because he's the chief. And that will be done, and I can rest assured you, whatever he says is going to happen. So I'll find out more about it, and if I need to, I'll put something on Newsbreak or whatever. But sales has been a strange department, and they're not associated with the USPS at all, look like it, you know. And we've been ruined in sales, and I think part of the problem that we're in right now is because lack of leadership in sales prior to that. Cliff is from the outside, never been a salesperson in his life, but he's data-driven, and I think he's going to change some things in sales. I don't know. He tells me he is. So we'll go from there and see, but sales is going to be the blood of the post office. We got to sell and drive up revenue, or we won't exist any longer. So hopefully there's a benefit, but bid to the outside is not the way to go because they're destroying the inside by doing that. And I'll go for other questions later on, but I want to give it back to Rochelle here. I don't want to take any more of her time, but I thought I need to address sales.
Thank you, Louis. Help me out. Yeah, because that's not the position, and Louis is correct. Like I said, we met with Tony V 2 weeks ago, and that's not what he had communicated to us, but we'll see. And what I'll do is, and Louis is going to check on it from his side, and if I get any information, whether it's yes or no, I'll try and share it with Craig to share it with all the rest of you out of the Central region. Hopefully that the positions, the 17th and the 19th, will be posted internally. Okay, now RIF procedures. I'm going to talk a little bit more about RIF procedures. Oh, okay, yes. Ms. Hardman.
Hi, Ms. Hartman. My question is, with the credit for service, be it the year to civil service or the 2 years preferred, during that time, will they still be paying into, or would that not be a part of the credit that you get? Paying into the retirement fund?
No, that credit will be given to you, and then if you take the retirement, it will just go into your annuity estimate to be paid out to you. So you won't have to still be paying into it. It will stop once you take that and accept the retirement and move on.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, was there any other questions out there? procedures. I'm going to talk a little bit about RIF procedures with you. All of that was RIF avoidance that I talked about earlier so that we wouldn't have to do RIF, but if the Postal Service must conduct a RIF, what do we need to do? Actually, there's some RIF statutes that we have to follow. OPM have RIF regulation and rules, and the Postal Service has some RIF policies that if you go on to light blue, I'm going to touch on the surface most of those policies, but if you want to go in detail, there's a 58-page report on the blue page that talks about RIF avoidance, and VERAs. And I'll have some of that today, but like I said, just for the sake of time, and I hope you can keep me on track with that time, because I'll get up here and start talking forever. And I'll touch on some of the surfaces. So there's RIF statutes out there, OPM have RIF regulations, and the Postal Service have RIF policies. And those apply to non-preference eligible employees. That's why the Postal Service has their own. OPM have some additional protection for veterans. And the RIF comes into play when one or more career and some non-career employees in a competitive area will be released from their competitive level by either demotion, separation, or the result of a reorganization. And once again, you can become separated, you can be demoted, you can be reassigned to a different position within the same level or at the same level that you currently are, or you can be reassigned to the same position in a different finance number or functional group. There are a couple, the two most common RIF processes is what I'm going to share with you today, and that's when we need to ensure a reduction in the number of authorized positions in a competitive area, or if we are closing a competitive area. And a lot of that is going on now. We're looking at, I know within the Great Lakes area alone with network optimization, we're looking at 27 plants where there is a study of 27 plants for potential closures. You know, we hear AMPs, we're AMPing here, we're either outgoing, originating, or destinating mail is taken out of facility. So there's the two most common reasons for a RIF to occur, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit now. So I mentioned preference eligibles have a little bit more rights or retention rights when it comes to a reduction in force. And preference eligible employees are those employees who are veterans in our veteran state today, spouses, widows, and mothers who meet the legal definition of the term. And if you want to know whether you're preference eligible, most of you will know that, but it'll show in block 11 on your form 50. So if you're interested in checking your veterans preference codes, whenever you receive a form 50, look in block 11 and it will give you some codes that identify your veterans preference eligibility. And like I stated earlier, in a RIF, preference eligibles are generally accorded greater rights to employment retention. And sometimes we hear of it in the U.S. Postal Service as bumping rights. We went through 3 different phases, and I'm going to talk about that in May. And the first phase was to ensure those veterans who were entitled to protection received placement before we started doing the other rounds of placement for non-veteran preference employees. The only thing that you need to consider, though, is that in a RIF, if they're closing a competitive area, there is no preference given to preference eligible veterans. All employees are released from that competitive area if that competitive area is closing. Let's talk a little bit about competitive areas. In a RIF, employees in a competitive area, they compete for positions within their area unless the competitive area is closing. And just recently, we had like southeast area, which closed. So those people that were in that southeast area had greater consideration because that area closed. Within the Great Lakes area, we had 2 districts that closed. The Northern Illinois District and Southeast Michigan closed. Those people were afforded other opportunities because their competitive area closed. The Postal Service organizational structure is divided into multiple competitive areas based on a couple of factors, and that's your organizational factor, your staff, and I pulled it for you, and it's also on the blue page, what is listed as a competitive area. And in headquarters, that's an organizational structure, and they have a list of competitive areas. Excuse me. We also have headquarters related organizational structures. And if you notice now, EEO is like a stovepipe to headquarters. HRM, the sales department, like Louis talked about, is kind of a stovepipe to headquarters. But the ones that mostly impact us, I'll share with you what those competitive areas are. Most of us function out of the field organizations. So a competitive area or a separate competitive area is if there's an airmail center, and a lot of our AMCs have closed. So each airmail center or airmail facility is identified as a competitive area. Each area office is a separate competitive area. NDC, each NDC is a separate competitive area. Each district office is a separate competitive area. A VMF, an independent delivery distribution center. If you work in an STC, that's considered a separate competitive area. ISCs is a separate competitive area. Each post office. We have some LNDCs, logistics and distribution centers. Those are identified as a separate competitive area. Each PNDC, each processing and distribution center, is identified as a separate competitive area. Some of us still exist in PNDFs, processing and distribution facilities. Those are separate competitive areas. We got a couple of rec sites out there that have been identified as separate competitive areas. Now there is a complete list of RIF competitive areas for the United States Postal Service on the blue page. And I did bring, and I'll leave it with Craig, a printout of all of the competitive areas that I pulled for you in case he wanted to distribute it to you guys at a later time. But like I said, this information is available to you on the blue page. Competitive levels. Each Postal Service position is placed into a competitive level. Positions that are similar in the following factors make up a competitive level. We're in the same pay system. We're in the same grade or occupational level. Classification, series, leadership codes, and our KSAs and other duty or job descriptions or position descriptions are the same. That makes up the competitive level. Now, if you are subject to a RIF, we also have a retention register. A retention register is just a listing of all of those employees within a competitive level and a competitive area that goes on a ranking sheet. And it's by tenure group, your preference eligible status. Now, if you're AD, and that's why I said check all of these things by going into your EOPF, because you don't want to find out that something is wrong with your RTRs, and that's a retirement thrift process, when you're upon a RIF. You want to make sure all of your information is correct today, right now, so that you won't have to fight those battles later. And the preference eligibility status is AD, and of course the AD status is those compensable with 30% or more service rankings. A status is compensable, but it's below the 30%. And of course, a B is there's no veterans preference entitled to you. Total federal service, your military and your civilian service as a postal employee. And then the other thing is credit for recent performance ratings. That's something that we now calculate when we're making a determination for RIFs or the retention register. And all of these are just applicable if the competitive area is reducing the number of authorized positions. So once again, check your status before you need your status, because we want to make sure that it's done correctly. Addresses, OPF, those things are going to be critical for us to make sure they're updated, because that's how communications are going to come out to us, and it's imperative that we have the right information on all of us. Usually there's, 10 minutes, there's 3 rounds, I'm right about there. There's 3 rounds of RIFs that are used when the number of authorized positions within an area must be reduced. Let's talk about round 1 of the RIF competition. In round 1 of the RIF competition, the determination is made to whether one or more employees, preference eligible or non-preference eligible, must be released from a competitive level, similar to what we just experienced in May of 2011. In round 1, employees are matched to the positions in their competitive area. We do some matching. In round 1, if you're preference eligible, some matching will occur, and that's what we did recently in May. If the employee's current position exists in a new redesigned or restructured organization, then he or she is matched to that position in the new redesigned organization. However, if the position does not exist, the employee is then released from that competitive level. This is round 1. And a lot of this stuff is done behind the scenes. You guys are not aware of it, and even within HR, some of this stuff is done at the OPM level, and we'll get into more of a process or assisting in the process in round 2 and 3. These employees that do not get placed in round 1 may be returned to the vacancies in the competitive area in round 3 placement. In positions with multiple incumbents under the round 1 process, if sufficient positions exist in the new redesigned, reorganized process, then all employees are matched to the position. Say, for instance, within human resources, I had 5 labor relations specialists, and in the new redesign process, the authorization was for 5. All of them were just slotted or placed into those 5 labor relations positions. If the positions have been reduced in number, with my same example, then the preference eligibles are matched to those positions first. Keeping in mind, preference eligible employees are entitled to a little bit more than non-preference eligibles. Then your non-preference eligible employees are matched. And if all of the non-preference eligibles cannot be placed, all of them are released from that competitive level. In round 2 of the RIF competition. Now, the determination is made in round 2 of the RIF competition whether all preference eligibles have an assignment right to a vacant or encumbered position in their competitive area now. So now if they didn't get something in round 1, then in round 2, then they are entitled to a vacant, or they may be entitled to an encumbered position, or which is what I refer to as their ability to do some bumping. Preference eligibles are assigned to those positions, if any, for which they are qualified at their grade level or up to 3 levels below their current level. What we try to do, though, when we're doing those placements is to place them at the level or position that is closest to their current grade or level prior or pre-RIF process. If the preference eligible is placed into an encumbered position, the employee who occupies that position is bumped or released from the competitive area. In round 3, and there's 3 rounds, and we just experienced that once again in May. The determination is made in round 3, and this is where the area office came into play during the May placements. If the determination, like I said, is made in round 3, whether the employee is preference eligible or non-preference eligible, they will be assigned to a position in their competitive area that remained vacant after we completed rounds 1, round 2, whatever is left in round 3. Now we're trying to match those still unplaced, impacted employees to whatever positions remain after the end of round 2. A listing of all of those vacant positions is released, and unassigned employees in the competitive area or is provided to those unassigned employees in a competitive areas. Selections are made to match those employees to the positions that we still need to be filled or that are still vacant. And during this placement process in round 3, an employee cannot receive a promotion. And the assignment is limited to a vacant position at the employee's grade, level, or below. Now, once again, if you are placed into a position at a lower grade or salary, you do have that 2-year salary protection and grade protection, and it has changed. And once those 2 years are over, you will be placed in a salary level if your salary falls within the grade or salary range. You can maintain that salary, but in some instances you cannot stay within that salary range and your salary will drop. Say for instance your salary is $90,000, just picking it up off the top of my head, and the position that you go into, the maximum, because there's a minimum and a maximum salary level, is $89,000. After that 2-year salary protection, you will go down or drop down in salary to that $89,000. Okay, so replacement. Based on the results of all of the 3 rounds that I talked about before, the employees will be provided a letter indicating that they were either replaced or they will be separated from the Postal Service, and that letter will include the separation date or the effective date of that separations. Employees who are matched to their pre-restructured positions in the design reorganization will not be provided a letter. So if you receive something and you were placed, then you won't get a replacement or separation letter because you've already secured a position. That's when I shout hallelujah. And I don't want nobody to lose their job if they don't want to. So closing a competitive area. All employees are released from their competitive area. Usually there's a general RIF notice. Say for instance in the recent reorganization, everybody at the area office received a general RIF notice because at that time we hadn't done round 1, we hadn't done round 2, and we didn't know who was going to remain unless your position was just one and that position existed in a new reorganized process. So usually the general RIF notice comes out 90 days. If you don't receive placement, then you get a specific RIF notification. And this is saying now, all right, now you've been targeted a little bit more and there's a little bit more specific information. And usually that notification is given to you 60 days in advance of the RIF effective date. A RIF effective date, like I said, is established and it is inserted in the RIF notification process that you get. If you are still impacted on the RIF effective date, then you become separated from the United States Postal Service. You may request leave WAP for 30 days, or what we call the 30-day list. And what that is saying is, I want to be still considered or placed on the 30-day list, but you're in a non-duty, non-pay status. But what that affords us to do is continuously look for placement for you in the event within that 30-day period that some additional retirements occur, or God forbid, death, or any kind of attrition occurs which vacates a position, and now you can be eligible to come back even though you're in a non-duty, non-pay status, and take that position. We also have what we call discontinued service retirement. And then those individuals who are part of a discontinued service, which is if you're not placed, you're eligible for immediate annuity if you're VEER eligible and if you're RIF separated. There's also severance pay out there. And what entitles you to severance pay is if you've been employed for at least 12 consecutive months prior to the RIF. You're not entitled to a retirement annuity, because if you're entitled to a retirement annuity, just start getting your monthly check and move on. Or if you're not receiving compensation as a beneficiary for any kind of FICA, if you're not injured on duty and getting something else, not separated because of entry into the military, because there's your SARA laws that apply to those processes, and that information is also available to you. And if you're not separated for cause or charge of misconduct, inefficiencies, or delinquencies. Severance pay calculations. Usually the severance pay calculation is based on 1 week of your base salary for each year of credible services up to 10 years, plus 2 weeks of your base salary for each year of credible service in excess of 10 years. However, the total fund that is paid to you in the severance pay cannot exceed an amount equal to 52 weeks of the employee's basic salary. And this is received each pay period. And for additional information, I'd like to give this to you because all of this is on the website. There is a severance pay calculator on the website at this web address. If you are separated due to a RIF, you can also request to be on a reinstatement list for 2 years. We talked about a 30-day period where you're in a non-duty, non-pay status, but you're still considered on our rolls. And you can also ask to be on a reinstatement, meaning that you will be separated from the rolls, but you can be reinstated in a 2-year period. Make sure if you are interested in that you ask for that. And there is a form also out there for that. So who's eligible for the reinstatement list? Yeah, if you become separated on your RIF date, if your last pay for performance is better than unacceptable. If you got an unacceptable rating, you will not be entitled to stay or request to be on a reinstatement list. So it's imperative that we do our jobs to the best of our ability so we won't get any unacceptable ratings. If you're found minimally qualified for any authorized position at the same or lower grade prior to the separation, and there's a Form 999 that you must complete. And the Form 999 and the reinstatement list information will be mailed to you when you get that specific RIF notification in the mail. And also make sure we look at the postings. There's postings that may be in various competitive areas which still remain vacant. And all impacted employees can apply for those positions while they're still active on the rolls. You cannot apply for them, however, if you're in a separated status. You can only apply for those positions if you are still on the rolls. That reinstatement list is not still considered on the rolls. What resources are out there for you? There's the organizational change website that we try to keep updated for you. And that website has detailed information and resources about what's going on. It usually has the timeline. It usually has links to the RIF. It has links to FAQs. And all you have to do to access the organizational change website is go to the blue page, click on organizational changes, and I looked at it this morning so I can make sure it was there, and I can tell you it was there. And it's right there on the right-hand side, or you can click to the organizational change website. If you go to the left-hand side and there's an HR box for group, you can also click on My HR, and there's a link to that organizational change on that as well. So there's a lot of resources out there for you. Make sure, please make sure that you know all of the opportunities available to you. If you want to stay on that 2-year, make sure we submit that PS Form 999 for the application for reinstatement. And that's the information that I have to share with you this afternoon. Do I have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Debbie Pagan, Northern Michigan. I'm asking on the mail processing centers, when you specify the areas of affected, whether it has a delivery unit or a mail processing unit or a function 4, you specify that each unit is separate in its own being. With mail processing centers that really aren't a plant, they're not classified as a plant, they're really all customer service units, how are the organizational units broke out in those situations?
Now you're saying that there's a separate function inside of a plant, if it's a standalone plant facility?
I have a delivery unit and a plant that isn't called a plant, it's called a mail processing center. So it's a delivery unit, its own entity, and then the mail processing center that's under the AMP study is its own study, whereas the whole organization, because it's under one roof, all affected.
Do you guys have the same finance number?
Yes, we do.
Okay, you're all under the one roof, and I'll double check that with the paper because I did print all of that out. But I think you all got the same finance number, and you're saying you're considered a processing and distribution center within something. It says separate. It says each processing and distribution center, PNDC, at the same finance number is considered one RIF organizational unit.
I have the same 6-digit finance, is it? Yeah, it's the same 6-digit, but I have a different 4-digit ending.
No. It's only through the 6-digit. The 4-digit add-on is just unique to that. That does not have an impact separating you
So
from
if it
it.
has the same 6-digit finance number, then the whole unit under the one roof, delivery, prop plant, function 4 is all inclusive in the AMP as far as your closure or RIF process service.
As far as a RIF impact goes, yes. Yes, sir.
Larry Ewing, Maker MVP. I have one situation where I have a standalone plant with its unique finance number, and I have 5 stations within the city, and they can bid craft-wise and job-wise back and forth.
It's the same bid installation.
Yes. So that is one RIF rule, or is that the plant, does the plant stand
So it's
alone?
considered a station and branches under one finance number?
All the stations
No,
have their own
they got
finance.
their own finance number. Well, it said each post office was a separate unit, and I'll have to double check with your stations and branches if they are part of the same bid cluster, which is what I hear you saying. They didn't break it down to that finite, but I will take a look at that for you. And once again, any kind of follow-up questions, I'll be able to Craig for distribution to all of you.
To point out one other thing, with the announcement that just came out yesterday or the day before, a lot of questions are coming to us about the PES system and the pay for performance. She mentioned a couple of times what the value is. Most of the questions are, why do I even worry about this? We're not getting paid, why even worry about it? Because if it trickles down to the point where you're the last man standing, you and one other person, your rating applies. You need to know that.
And that's very important because that's what a lot of people said as soon as we heard the announcement and they contacted us. Well, they want to give up. If I'm not getting paid, I'm not doing any work. But when it comes to a RIF process, that's going to be important for you. That's going to be important to us and for placement process. So that's why you should still make sure that you do the very best you can because it will have an impact on you. Yes, Pam.
Tony Stores.
Gary Brent.
Tony Coleman Scruggs, how you doing?
How you doing? Okay. I recently, we had the AMP study for Gary.
Yes.
Initially, when it was initiated, it was supposed to, the study was done on the mail going to South Bend. But subsequently, you know, they made changes in saying that our mail processing was, the plant was going to go to South Suburban. So I mean, I just got the letter the other day from the study and the impact and basically how many jobs we're going to lose and everything, but it says South Suburban. Does that say, that study, since it was initially for South Bend, which was Indiana, versus now going to South Suburban, do they need to do another one, or?
No, they don't have to conduct another study. And I am aware of the migration into South Suburban, which is part of another district, but it does not require another study. Now, what I will say, Tony, is have you guys had your informational meeting with the employees where you had the public input meeting?
Our public input meeting is scheduled for November 21st. We're the second one. We had the first one.
We had the first one out of Gary when it was just outgoing mail.
Well, we had the very first one. Now, this one is November 21st is giving the question and feedback and actually telling the results and what's going to happen.
Okay, yeah. Usually at the public input meetings, you guys are allowed to, and I know most of everybody from the public input meetings is a lot of postal employees, so those final comments and questions will be addressed, but it does not require for them to do another study. And unfortunately, the AMPs, we're going to see that a lot more as we go forward, because the brick and mortar and the infrastructure that we currently have, we just don't have enough mail flowing through those. But make sure if there's some unanswered questions or any additional information, attend those public briefings, because that's the purpose of that. Now, the final submission or the final decision is based on your input or your feedback, and they do take that into consideration.
Now, I do know with ours, because we do have delivery, they only looked at the mail processing. So from what I keep hearing is the stations, there's one station and then the other stations is supposed to eventually just move into the plant. So they didn't do, when they did the study, they didn't do it on the delivery side. They just did it on the plant. So
I don't have a lot of specificity on each individual AMP, so I don't want to just address, you know, whether this one or that one, but you will have an opportunity. All of the players will be on your November 21st meeting. Make sure you ask those questions. I do know Lynn Smith and all of the leadership under the Indianapolis district, which you currently fall under, will be there. And if I'm not mistaken, the South Suburban, I think Peter Allen will be there, as well as the gating facility and some of these mail processing events. So you'll have an opportunity to interact with all of the leadership at that time during that public briefing.
because we keep hearing that particular SAT G, which we fall under, we're the only SAT that's Central Time. We keep hearing that particular section, SAT was also going to be possibly converted to be part of Illinois.
You ain't gonna get me to talk about that.
Thank